Greetings, everybody. It's me, Patricia Cori, coming to you from Beyond the Matrix, the program that invites you to think outside the box. And I have a very interesting guest, Mike Oram. We're going to be talking about some very similar experiences. And I don't usually go down the Starseed experience or path when I come to you, because you kind of all know what my background is, and I don't like to focus on myself all the time. But when I was contacted by Mike, I was flabbergasted to see such a similar path, such a similar Syrian path, replete with the Black Panther power animal and God knows what else. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's my delight to introduce you, probably don't need to introduce you, but to introduce you today to Mike Oram. Hi, Mike. Thank you for being on my show.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Patricia, and I've read all your books, and I'm not just saying this because I'm trying to be nice. I've read all your books, and they are some of the best books on UFOs and contact that I have read. And it was when I heard you in one of your talks where you suddenly said about this experience that happened when you were 4 years old, which was almost identical to mine. And that was the sole reason that I'd contacted you, not expecting to be on the show, but just to share that experience.
Well, thank you for agreeing to come on. When you wrote me that, I said, I need to talk to this man. So tell us, I mean, people know about my experience walking into the kitchen and telling my mother I was from a parallel universe. And, you know, from there, it's been a wild ride with very concrete experiences like you've had. So let's start with you and tell us exactly what happened when you were 4 years old.
Yes. Now, one thing a lot of people have mentioned to me over the years is, how did a child of 4 use such terminology?
Exactly.
And it was just there in my head. And the words I'm going to tell you now is what just came through me to my mother. Now, I was born in the East End of London, in a place called Stratford, where the Olympics was held back in 2012. And I was we lived upstairs in this small terraced house, and my aunt and uncle lived downstairs. And I was standing in the small living room with my mother. I can see it as clear as anything. And I suddenly said to her, right out of the blue, there is no such thing as death. And she said to me, well, what do you mean? She said, when you die, you die. I said, no, you don't. And I could see in my head this image of a grave. I'd never been to a graveyard, but I saw a grave like being dug and a body was put inside it and covered up with soil. And I explained that to her, and I said, look, we don't die once we're in the ground. I said, we go on forever. Wow. In many different lifetimes. And then I said, but also, Mum, you are not my real parents. And she was shocked. And she stepped back and she said, well, of course we are. You were born in this house. I said, you are my parents as far as bringing me onto this earth. But my real parents are out there in space. And I pointed up into the sky. And I then went on and said to her, Mum, I said, something of incredible importance is going to happen on this planet that will affect all units of consciousness, whether they were mineral, vegetable, animal, or man. And I said, but not in your lifetime, Mum, but in mine.
You were 4 years old when you said this.
I was 4 years old. And my mother never stopped talking about it to me as we went through the decades.
Yeah, same with me.
It really did affect her.
Well, I think that, you know, one of the reasons is because age-wise, I think we're sort of similar. And back in the day, the language wasn't this. So today's children have so much access to so much otherworldly information that it
Yeah.
wouldn't necessarily be that surprising. But back in the day,
Yes.
it was talking in galactic terms, right?
1955 it was when I was 4 years old.
Yeah.
I was,
So
yeah,
it was 1956 for me.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know, my mother, I remember her also, I don't remember the actual telling her, but year after year, she would remark about the things that I did as a child and things I said. Can you hear the rain pounding?
I can't hear it, no.
I'm in the middle of a big storm here. Um, she would marvel at it because parallel universe language simply didn't exist back then. I mean, when I hate to date myself, but I was, you know, we were just coming out of black and white TV back then, right?
Yes, yes.
So to sit there and say, you know, I know, and what I told my mother was similar to what you said to your mother. When I come from a parallel universe, you're not ready to understand that right now.
Yes,
But
yeah.
there will be a time, you know, and I'll get back to you. And I walked out, leaving her perplexed. And then after that, so many things. Like I went to kindergarten, and we had show and tell in school in America. I don't know if you have that in England, but
No.
basically the children would bring something of theirs, like a doll or whatever, to school and describe it to the other children. And this would teach them some communication skills. Well, what did I bring? A box of crystals, because I used to forage in the mountains because we lived in a beautiful home in the mountains. And I would find Indian arrowheads and quartzite and whatever. So I bring my box of crystals, unbeknownst to my mother. I bring this box of crystals to the class. I tell some, you know, what are you going to do today, Patricia? And I mean, I don't remember it vividly, but she recounted it to my mother. And I said, I'm going to do a crystal healing. Grabbed one of the kids, laid him down, put these crystals on his body, and he went into deep state, altered state. The teacher freaked out because this kid was like gone. And I was doing what I did 40 years later. And so she called my mother and said, we need to talk about Patricia. And when they had the meeting, she said, I'm very worried about Patricia. She's not normal. She's not like the other children. And my wonderful mother said, well, that for one thing is a wonderful thing to hear. Has she done something wrong? She said, no, she's done something strange. And she told my mother. My mother replied, my wonderful mother replied, listen up. My daughter is very special, like any mother thinks, but she's got very special gifts. And so as long as she's not hurting anybody, do not interfere with that. Don't tell her she's not normal. And if she's got a problem, if she hurts anybody, you can get back to me. If not, leave her alone. So I did my first crystal healing being an old Atlantean, and I've got a feeling you've got similar experience when I was 5. Is that a trip?
That's very wise of your mother to say that.
My mother, I was blessed with the most extraordinary mother. She was my mentor, and she
Yeah.
protected me, and she allowed for this open psychic childhood so that I didn't have to unlearn it and then relearn it. What was your experience?
Well, comparing to what you've just mentioned with the crystals in school, mine was a bit different to that because my teachers used to say, we need to talk to you, like my parents, and my parents would be called into school and they would say, look, Mike is so intelligent, but he's not going to pass any exams because all he does is sits there and stares out the window.
Wow.
They said he's got no attention to the lessons in school. And I didn't. I just wanted to know what was going on out there. I wasn't interested in history and the Battle of Hastings or geography or cavemen or Joseph's amazing dream coat in religious instruction. None of it interested me. The only thing that did was mathematics, funny enough.
That's interesting. Well, I mean, imagine here you are, a starseed traveler, and you get plunked down in this elementary, you know,
Yeah.
primitive education program.
Yes.
And, you know,
Yes.
I think that we speak for a lot of starseed when we talk about how difficult that is,
Yeah.
because, you know, in my experience, and I'm sure yours too, I keep encountering starseed who are struggling with this. I don't really feel like I belong here because
Yeah.
actually What were we thinking?
Mm.
And of course,
Yes,
the answer is we came here to be part of this, what you told your mother, something huge
yes.
is going to happen here. And we came here to nest it and to be part of the birthing of Gaia on the birthing chair. And how do you think we're doing so far?
Uh, well, that's a big question. Now, going back, if I go back to the say the 1970s, now I used to talk to people then about this ascension of consciousness, and what we had to do to prepare ourselves, etc. Now, not many people were talking about it back in the 1970s,
No.
but I thought it would have come quicker. And I used to say, well, how will you shift consciousness? And I said, well, look, I said, there's not going to be any God that's going to point a finger down and say, you're staying, you're going. I said, the beauty of separating the wheat from the chaff is that we do it through the frequency, through the quality of our own heart center and our mind and our soul. This will allow you to shift awareness. You don't have to have 50, 60 years of knowledge like I have of flying saucers and contact experiences or reading my esoteric books. You just need to have a good quality of being. And this is what I was saying to people then.
Yeah,
Now,
well, because it's one thing to have acquired knowledge, it's another to have the expanded heart.
mm,
The it's all about frequency, and
mm,
it just feels like now we're in many ways we're moving past the whole UFO ET
yes,
discussion. Even
that's it.
though, of course, and we'll be talking about it today, there is this great divide about people who believe that the reptilians are in control of the planet, people who want to believe that light beings from higher dimensions are counteracting that negative energy. And the bottom line is it still all boils down to what level of energy, what vibratory signature you hold. And it's
Absolutely.
either you're going to vibrate to that fear or you're going to vibrate to that light. And it's like when you said separate the wheat from the chaff, it really is show and tell time.
Yes.
We're here.
We're here. We're at that moment. This is the moment I was telling my mum. I've gone all goosebumpy now because I'm thinking this is what I told my mother when I was 4. And when I used to tell people about this experience, and they'd say to me, "Well, it hasn't happened yet, has it?" And I said, "Well, no, it hasn't happened. It's not happened yet." I said, "But it will happen." "Well, you're getting older now. Do you think you might die before it happens?"
Oh
And I
dear.
said, yeah, and I said, well, I told my mother I would be here. So I'm absolutely sure I will be here. And this event now is very close.
Very close. What do you think
Yeah.
this looks like? I mean, this is a big question, and it's kind of getting off track because we haven't even talked about your book. Of what a time does it rain in other dimensions? We will. We're going to have several talks, you and I, because I just have this feeling we're getting reacquainted. But how does it look to you? It's like, we've got theories of the split Earth, the Dolores Cannon theory of the Earth
Mm,
actually physically separating, which I don't resonate with that theory. Actually, it's
mm,
I don't resonate with it. So
yes.
I'm curious how you see, because we are in the throes of this intense battle of darkness and light, and it just every day it's more absurd and overwhelming and extreme. Upside down world is what I call it. But how do you see us when we both agree that we're in the throes of it? People are dying to know, are we going to get through this? Are we going to really get to the other side of this? And I'd love to know your input.
Well, as I say, going back to the 1970s when I was telling people this event would happen, I had no hesitation. I was 100% absolutely positive that this would happen. I used to say to people, you have to stay in the light. Do not dwell on the negative. We are higher frequency than the negative. And whatever is going to happen, keep your frequency high. Stay in the light, and you will then move on into a different type of existence, if you like, a different place. Now, I used to think at one time that all this dark energy that's on this planet, and it's been here for thousands of years, possibly, that that would be moved off the planet and we would somehow vibrate somewhere else. And then I used to think, well, maybe if you can clear up all this negative energy, if we can sort out these satanic people, then possibly with Gaia, because I think Gaia, who is reasonably easy to get in contact with, that Gaia is also ascending into this higher frequency. And we have to remember that we have to also help Gaia, although she won't. Her mission is to make sure that she ascends, and it's up to us to go with it. But it doesn't come easily. I say to people, you have to work on it. You have to meditate. You have to get in tune with yourself. It's all about frequency. But back in the 1970s, I actually thought it would have happened sooner than this. To me, it feels like there's some sort of delay. But I might be wrong about that. But I never actually thought it would be as dark as it is.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, it's becoming so incredibly controlling. It's going to be even difficult to express your own spiritual viewpoint if it is against the agenda. And I think this is the problem now. But I still have no hesitation that I've always said my whole life that in the end, dark is no match against the light. Even though these things seem to go on throughout the universe, it is no match against the light. And I think if enough people wake up, and I think that's the criteria, is how do you get people awake? Now, after 50 odd years of talking about ufology, I've still not got, there's still so many people on this planet that are not interested.
It's amazing.
And, I might throw just a couple of words, just to see if there's a way to enter into their world, just to open them up a bit more to these other realities. And I might say, well, do you believe in like flying saucers or unidentified flying objects, possibly coming here from other planets or dimensions? And they either don't even want to know, and then I might move on and say, well, I've actually met people from other dimensions and their craft, thinking that might just entice them or excite them to say, oh, really? Tell me about it. And they don't.
What do they think? You're just a
want to
kooky old
know.
dude?
Eh?
What do they think? You're just some kooky dude?
Well, probably think I'm a bit of an idiot.
But
really.
you know what, Mike? What my experience is, it is beyond my perception, my capacity to understand how anyone can be completely disinterested in the possibility, the science, the conspiracy information. I mean, complete disinterest. And, I wonder, why is it that so many of us are clear and awake, and it's so clear, and that others just have no, it's not only not that they don't have perception, they have no desire, like you said. And that is something that I just don't understand.
No.
I don't know if it's mind control coming through the television, which for sure has a lot to do with it, because I have not had television for 25 years, never will again. Yeah. But even in television, there are proposals of, call it fiction, of science fiction, that would certainly tweak nothing.
But they don't marry the two up. They keep the film as a film.
Yes.
They don't necessarily think about the content or the message.
No.
And we have this conversation all the time. Why are we so different? I mean, we were like almost like we were born awake. All I can think is that we are of a different line, and we've
Yeah.
come down here. That's not in an egotistical way, but there's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people come here to help with this shift, to try and wake people up. And it's not been as easy as possibly we thought it would. But when you make a decision to come here to do these tasks, which have always gone on right back to Atlantean times and beyond, that we underestimate how difficult it will be to come back down into 3D in a physical body with a lower mind to deal with as well. And we underestimate it. And a lot of people fall by the wayside. I think a lot of starseeds can fall by the wayside, or they get trapped by the glamour of things here and in this heavy element. And we always underestimate it. And but it's exciting times now. It's incredibly exciting to see how this is working with this dark satanic energy, and they're throwing everything at us now
And more.
Control.
Yeah, let me just interrupt here to say that that was an interesting point when you said they get caught up in the glamour. You were talking about starseeds and how the whole starseed consciousness in some ways has been turned into a market, right? And we have people that are just, everybody is capitalizing on the starseed imprint and the marketing of that. And it, therefore, if it's a market, it's been infiltrated because that's how marketing works.
Absolutely.
So the getting to the core, the truth, the starseed experience and the truth of it is often wrought with a lot of misinformation and ego and problems. And so one of the problems that we have when you talk about being here to help awaken people is that, the disinformation, like you call it, the glamour, the glitz, call it what you want, that has deliberately thrown people off on understanding that imprint, that starseed knowledge. And those of us who have come here to be of service, getting watered down in the miasm plasma of ego-centered consciousness, misinformation, and gadgets that are for sale in New Age shops.
Yeah. I'm not into gadgets, and I'm not really into a lot of this technology. I mean, I'm just an ordinary guy that's having extraordinary experiences.
Yeah, me
I
too.
don't claim to be anything special because I'm not. And I'm only helping in a tiny, tiny, tiny way. But if you multiply that by tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people around the world, then hopefully we are making some sort of change here with people. And
Well, I love that about you, and that's one of the resonant aspects, because I can't bear to keep hearing about the personal experience of that self-consciousness of being starseed and having a mission, etc. It's like, it's very subtle here. It's just, here to do what I can, have a lot of memory like you do, and a lot of experience as well, and hoping to just keep being a grounded spiritualist, which that's my mantra. Is just be grounded in your spirit, be a lighthouse to help others open their heart and be in fearlessness. And it is a tall order at this time.
it is a tall haul. Yes, it is. It is. And in some ways, I feel that it hasn't moved as fast as it should have done. But I think with the controllers on this planet, they're doing their damnedest to make sure that people don't wake up.
Oh yeah. I
And
mean,
that is a
well,
problem.
you've read my book, so you know the theory that the Syrians gave us about how the Nibiruans are trying to bring down the frequency of the planet.
Yes.
in order to hook on to ascend into the fourth dimension, which our sun is progressing into. Really, that theory was 1998, that book got channeled. And
Yes.
boy, I've never read anything quite like that, because right now the um, mantra is that we're in the fifth dimension, we're reaching for five-dimensional consciousness. And the Syrians are like, excuse me, you're going to have to go through the fourth first. And I think that's what's happening. It's getting in through this quagmire of the fourth dimension and all of this karma, or everything. It's sort of like, the Dante's Gate to the River,
Yeah.
and the Egyptian Book of the Dead and the Tibetan Book of the Dead, all describing the same thing. It's like having to go through this purification before we get
Yeah.
higher. And
Yeah.
it's like that's what we're in now.
Yeah,
Definitely what we're in.
I agree. And I used to do, I worked for a spiritual healing center back in the mid 1980s. And they done healing through past life research, but that wasn't going back into a past life, like leading them back into a past life initially. It was getting in touch with their soul and asking the soul to direct it to a place where the problem that these people might have come with, where it started, and deal with it from where it started. And we used to take them through the dying process at the end of that life, and they would go into this, I suppose, esoterically, it could be the karmalokic plane or the fourth dimension, but it's there where they had to then deal with their karma and reflect on their life and sort it all out before you can move on in your finer energy. Now, some people were stuck there, and using the ether, they could create what they wanted, not realizing they had died, and they could create a little cottage that they used to live in or something like that, and they could be there in earth terms for years.
And not know.
And then suddenly I used to say, well, is there a light there somewhere? Can you see a light anywhere? Just look around, because it seemed very dark. And one of the experiences that they would have, and they would say, oh, there's a little light over there. And I said, well, start walking towards it. And then eventually the light got bigger, and I said, step into the light. And they would go into the light, and that's where they meet people that they knew, families that they knew, a different type of experience, and they'd moved on. Or other people might have seen someone suddenly appear. And I would say, well, what are they doing? Well, they're waving to me. I say, well, go over and see them. And they would take them out of that darkness. They'd finished being in that still rather heavy element. And they'd go into the light and on. Now, whether that's the fifth dimension, I don't know, but it was a much better place than where they were stuck.
Well, that's really interesting, because have you read Ashayana Dayan's books?
Oh, yes, yes.
So I don't really resonate with that information, but particularly the fact that she brought this concept that which is very popular now, that actually when you see the light, you're being trapped, you're being fooled. And
I don't agree with it.
I just can't find that. You're being recycled to go to the light. You'll see images. A lot of people are talking about this. You'll see, loved ones and whatever, angels, Mary, and this is being used to fool you. And I just don't resonate with it at all. And my
Yeah.
message has always been to people: do you really think that at the soul level you're so naive, so incapable, so powerless that you go to an artificial light, don't know the
No,
difference?
no. In fact,
I don't think so.
my partner came in to see me, Fran, one day. She was listening to something online. Now, I might be wrong here. I don't know whether it was something that Simon Parkes was talking about, but I might be wrong. And she came in and said, this person had just said that don't go into the light. And I said, why ever not? Well, because it's a trap. And I said, no, the trap is telling you not to go into the light.
Exactly.
That's the trap. And when my mother was close to death, I said to her, now look for the light. Don't look back. Go into the light. You've got now you have to now move on from the family. Don't get attached with the things down here in 3D. You've got to move on from that, and we will see you again anyway in spirit or wherever we are. But go towards the light. And I've got absolute belief that there's nothing wrong with the light. And like you say, you would know, your soul would know if you're walking into danger.
Well, the thing is that what a beautiful, if you really think about it, what a beautiful con or manipulation of the human being. It's not bad enough that we have to deal with dark and light here and all this fear and self-doubt and disempowerment, but we're getting set up so that when we leave here, we still have to be afraid of our own power, afraid of the light. And that, like you said, that's the trap, believing that you have to be afraid of it. And this is very popular in spiritual circles, this concept. And I reject it completely. And I have been, and probably you too, seeing that we're such twins in some ways, I have had a near-death experience. I have been in that tube. I have known the wonder of that light, the love of it.
Like my funnel experience then, when you said the tube, the experience that I had when that funnel appeared. Oh, I could tell you about that. Perhaps that's a little bit later.
Okay.
I don't know whether we want to follow from a chronological order.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about, first of all, the book. It's not new, is it?
No, I wrote the book it was published in 2007. And on the back of that, I was invited to speak at Laughlin at the UFO conference in Nevada.
Right. Okay.
Which, yes.
So let's, you have an idea of the things you want to talk about. So let's go, like you said, in chronological order, and talk about. I'm very interested in your experience with actually encountering beings. I'm very interested in your experience with Area 51, and wherever we want to go, we go. So
okay. Now I said to you in one email, Area 51 might be best to have as a separate talk because it takes at least 45 minutes to get through the whole experience. And if we don't do the whole experience, people will wonder what happened to me.
Okay, well, we will just let everybody know that we will follow up with a separate program about Area 51, which I'm sure everybody is curious to know. All right, so take us where you want to go, which you consider chronological order of the life of Mike Oram.
Well, after that experience in 1955, I'm talking about my experiences that had great impact on me. Obviously, there were things in between that, but it was when I was now age 7, so it was 1958, and I was in bed and I suddenly woke up. Now, I've known throughout my life now that if I'm going to be, I don't like to use the word taken, I use transitional experiences. Although some of the times, many times I was taken by the Greys for sperm extraction, and I've woken up on occasions, but whether it was a positive experience or one a bit more negative, when I wake up from sleep, it's different because I always wake up wide awake. There's never any drowsiness, and I'm quite alert. And in this time, I woke up and there was a man standing at the bottom of the bed, and he seemed to be in this silver suit.
How old were you at this point?
I was 7. It was 1958.
Okay.
And I was a bit shocked, obviously. And I sat up in bed and I said, "What are you doing here?" And he was just looking at me, but in a nice way. And then he started to move towards me, and I pushed my back against the headboard and the wall behind it. And all I remember next is running out to mum and dad. It was a small place, so once my sister and me had to sleep in separate bedrooms, my mum and dad lived on a put-up bed in the tiny living room. So I rushed out there and I said, "Someone's in my room." My dad picked up the poker for the fire and started running in there. Mum followed him, and they eventually came back out and they said, "Oh, there's nobody there." They said, "You must have dreamt it." Well, I knew I hadn't dreamt it. And she said to me, "There's lots of things happening in this house now." And she wasn't like too happy about it. But shortly after this, now I didn't put this in my book because I was a bit too uncomfortable putting it in the book. Although there's stuff in the book that's people might think, "Oh yeah, it's all imagination." But this I thought was perhaps too much for them to take on board. But it was shortly after this, so I was still aged about 7, and it was the first day of the start of my 6-week summer holiday. And this incident ended on the last day of this 6-week school holiday. Apparently I was ill. Now I remember being in bed and something was wrong with me. My doctor came every morning and injected me in the backside. And she gave me these strange things that I had to take. One was like about that long, a long white brown thing, like little worms, and little beads, hard little beads about that big. And I had to take them every, I think it was either 2 or 3 hours, around the clock for days. And my mum had to do it right through the night. And sometimes there were 2 men that stood behind the doctor.
Were they,
Now,
hold on, were they 3-dimensional people or were they beings?
they look real to me. They look 3D. And I said to my mother when I was older, I said to her, "Well, what was wrong with me?" "Oh," she said, you swallowed an orange pip." I said, "Right, and what happened?" She said, "Well, they wanted it out of your body." And I said, "Did it come out?" She said, "Eventually." And I said, "What did it look like?" Well, she said, "It looked like it was a tree. A tree was growing in your stomach." I said, "Tree? A tree can't grow in my stomach." She said, "It was growing in your stomach." She said, "And it had roots and branches on it." So I said, "Well, how did it come out?" And she said, "Well," she said, "if you ever went to the toilet, I had to check to see if it had come out." And so I said, "So it did come out?" She said, "Yes, it came out." And it was like a little tree. It had little branches and roots. I said, "So what did you do with it?" She said, "They took it, they wanted it, they took it away."
Wow.
I said to my mum, "Was I very ill?" And she said, "Oh, yes." She said, "At one point we thought you were going to die." So I said, "Well, wasn't I in hospital if I was going to die?" She said, "There wasn't any room." But that all seemed rather bizarre.
Very.
Now, I mentioned this. I mean, I didn't eat oranges for years, years and years and years and years, because I was so afraid of another tree growing inside of me. It was it wasn't till I saw, well, there was another incident in, I've got to get this right because there's two incidents. There was another incident, it would have been in the early 1990s. And I was out, it was a very hot day. And I was outside washing my car and I just had my shorts on. And I was bending down, cleaning one of the wheels, when a neighbour of mine came home from work. Now, funny enough, this neighbour, I got her interested in UFOs. And she said, do you think you could arrange one for me to come? So I said, well, yes. I said, I'll sort that out and see if it can happen. Well, cut a long story short, it did happen. And she rushed upstairs to my place and she was so excited with this large silver globe hovering outside of her bedroom window. But the point is, her mind had been tweaked anyway. But she got out of her car and come over to see me. And she said, oh, what's that big lump on your back? So I said, well, doctors have said it's a cyst. And I said, I've asked them several times and they said they didn't know what it was. It must be a cyst, Sue. So she said, well, it looks like a little blackhead. She said, do you want me to try and pull it out? So I said, well, yeah, okay. And I could feel her thumbnails pressing into my back. And she said, oh, the top's just popped out. She said, I'll pull it out. And she was pulling and I could feel it, pulling and pulling and pulling and pulling. It was getting longer and longer. And she said to me, when it came out, I just heard her, because she was behind me, I heard her say, oh my God, what the hell is that? So I turned around and she held it out in the palm of her hand. Now, somewhere here, I've got an image. Now, this is my own image of when it opened out. It was something like that.
So that's very reminiscent of Morgellons. Are you aware of Morgellons?
I am aware of Morgellons, yes. And I thought, well, my mum said this tree, it had roots, what looked like roots and branches. She pulled it out and it was in her hand. It was folded up at first. And very quickly, in the sunshine, it dried out and opened out. It spun round and opened out to like something like that. I took it upstairs. I got a clean jar and I put a tissue in it. And I was just going to drop it in the jar. And I was out of control. I suddenly turned round and put it down the toilet and flushed it away. And I couldn't do anything about it. Now, when some years later, Steven Spielberg's amazing series that he'd done, it was 10 episodes called Taken, and it followed the history of 2 or 3 different families who had contact throughout. At the start of each episode, it used to give you some quick flash images, and they were always the same ones at the start of the 10 episodes. And in one of them, the father of one of the families, they take something out of his neck, I think it was, and they laid it down, and it was just like the thing that come out of my back, and then it opened out. It was identical to what came out of my back. It was most unusual.
What is your understanding of what it was?
All I can think is that it was some sort of implant, because why did these people want it out of my back when I was a child? And it sounds similar with Mum saying it looked like a tree because it had roots. So I really don't know.
I'd like to give you my impression. My impression is that the 2 men that were standing behind the doctor were ET. They weren't 3-dimensional beings.
I mean, I wouldn't have known. I wouldn't have known that.
But I mean, doesn't it make sense? It's almost like they were men in black or observers or something.
I thought Men in Black.
Yeah.
When I got older and read up on the subject, I thought,
so,
MIB.
So in your journey through this experience, which is quite, I mean, it's scary. What do you understand that you say that it's some sort of an implant, but having lived with this for so many years, number one, why would you have been implanted? And number two, do you think you're really clear? Free.
I don't know if I'm clear or not,
Uh-huh.
but I do. But when I was taken by the Greys for years and years and years,
Wow.
and sometimes it could be 3 or 4 times a week. It was very tiring actually, and I would I would suddenly wake up, as I said, and there's no drowsiness,
I
and
know.
that's important because
Waking up like, pow.
yeah, you're powering and you're totally awake. And you know something's going to happen. Now, I might know a couple of minutes before something's going to happen. It might be an hour or two. It could even be a day. But I know if you can feel this, you can feel this energy getting closer to you. And I would suddenly wake. Almost immediately after, I would start getting a buzzing in my head. Now, I think this, since studying this, it seems to be a bit of a classic, but some people are frightened of it. I used to love it. And the frequency would start in my head and it would increase, it would get faster and faster, and it would go through my whole body. My whole body was vibrating so incredibly fast. And I just loved it. Not necessarily what was going to happen, but I loved this frequency change. And then I would just lift off. Now, whether I went physically, I must have gone physically, and I'd go straight through the ceiling or the window, and I could see a light in the sky, and I would just go into that light, and then normally that's it until I come back. But I remember one time I actually woke up, and I was laying on this bed, type of bed, and I lifted my head up because when that frequency starts, the only thing I can do is move my head. And I lifted my head up and looked down my body, and there were like 4 or 5 classic greys, about what, for 3, 4 foot high. But standing next to me, his back was to me, looking down at the others, was this taller grey, and he was a slightly darker colour.
Yeah.
And he could have been, I don't know, 7 foot. I can't remember because I was lying down. And I think mentally, he must have realised I'd come awake because his head suddenly turned around in shock and he looked at me. And the next second, his eyes were right in front of me, these huge, dark, black, wet eyes.
Insect eyes.
Yes, and then I lost consciousness again. But what I
Sorry.
so what I did remember was there was something on my penis. It looked like leather, but it wasn't leather. But it was like, it must have been to get me erect or something, because it was pulling on my groin. And the
Yeah.
skin on I could see the skin on my groin pulling up really tightly. And that's when this grey turned round. But my groin ached for quite a few days afterwards. Now this would happen 3 or 4 days a week. This sperm taking.
I
And
imagine you got a lot of static when you tried to tell this story.
I don't talk about it really.
Well, thank you for sharing it here.
Um, and I've never really talked about what implants, whatever they were. No, because it is a bit embarrassing. But it happened, and
It
it was a
shouldn't
big
be
part of my
embarrassing, though.
life.
I mean, first of all, it's happening to many people, and your experience of it, your understanding of it, that they're collecting sperm. That's the way they get it, right?
It's the way they get it. Because I have been taken, but this is later on down the line. I'm jumping sequence here, but I've been taken on craft and been shown at least one of my children, and it was a very emotional experience.
So what did it look like, this hybrid?
If it wasn't for the eyes, It had, she had very, very fine hair, wispy hair. She was very beautiful, I thought she was. And she could have passed in the street, but if she had dark glasses on, because her eyes were larger. They weren't almond shaped, they were round shaped, but they were bigger than our eyes, and it would have made her look odd.
Have you
But
had
this,
any more communication with her?
yes, I was when I first went, this lady who was a bit like the front of my book, but not quite. When my friend drew that, these should have been more closer up because I said that it looked like a tulip, and at first I thought it was a nun because of the shape of the French nun, because of the shape of the head. She came out from behind, it must have been a screen, but because it was all white, you couldn't see anything. She just came round and she brought out this little girl. And I had a regression with Dolores Cannon, and I went back to this experience, and it was quite telling because with her with this regression that she gave me, I found myself in this room, craft, whatever it was, and she said, "Can you see anything?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I must be in hospital." So she said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, there's a bed over there, and there's several people in white gowns around the bed." And she said, "Well, what do you think's happening?" I said, "I don't know." So she said, "Well, walk over there and go and have a look." So I walked over there, and as I got nearer, I could see that these doctors weren't human, although they had a mask on. Their eyes were different. And I looked down, and this lady that was lying on the bed, she looked human, but her face was totally different. It was human, but quite different. But she was lying on the bed, and she was naked from like the top of the belly button to just below it. And I said, "Oh," I said, "there's they're using." I said, "There's like an umbilical cord," and I said, "She's got some sutures," and there was this baby was still attached, and Dolores said to me, "Well, whose baby is it?" I said, "I don't know." She said, "Well, ask." There was this other lady there who brought the child out, similar to her, that was with me here, and she said, "Well, ask her." And I asked her, and she said, "Well, it's yours." And Dolores said, "Well, have you got any more children like this?" I said, "I don't know." And she said, "Well, ask her." So I asked her, and she said, "Oh yes, there's quite a lot." And then at the same time, I was in this room where there was they were like glass jars. I don't know whether they were glass. They were about this tall and about like this wide, narrowed in at the top, and they were connected to tubes. There was a long line of them, 2 or 3 lines of them, and inside were like fetuses. And when I came back from this, I was quite angry because I thought, well, look, if these are my children, I want to meet one of them. And I sat in meditation and I demanded that they allow me to see one of these children. And I don't know if it was the next night, a night after, 3 or 4 nights, but I was taken. And I was on this craft, and that's when they brought this child out to me, the one I told you about earlier. And I knelt down to her height. She looked about 6 years old in Earth terms, but she had like it appeared to me like it was 1950s sort of dress. It used to have the smocking along the top of the dress. And she was gorgeous. And I said hello to her, but she didn't speak at that point. And I stayed there for a while. And then this lady that brought her out took her back. And I came back. And again, I was angry. And a couple of months down the line, I really don't know now, but I demanded to go back again. And I was taken back, and they brought this child out, and she was a bit taller. But then there was a couple of years gap, and I suddenly thought, now this is not right. You know, I just can't accept this. You know, that they come into my space, they take my sperm, and I've got no interaction with these children. And I thought, no, I'm not putting up with it. So I sat and meditated again, and I said, I'm really, really angry about this, and I must go back and see her. And I went again, and they brought her out, and she was older. But this time I knelt down, and I was looking into her eyes, and it was really emotional. I mean, it was a tearjerker, and she said to me, "I love you." I couldn't believe it. It went straight through my heart center.
That's amazing.
I said to her, "I love you as well."
Oh,
It's hard because you have no access to them, and I don't think it's right for that to happen.
no, it's not. Do you have contact with Mary Rodwell? I know she deals with a
Yes,
lot.
I do. I know her very well. Yes,
Yeah, I love Mary, and she's
yes,
so she's got quite a number of people that have gone through what you've gone through, right?
yes, yes. Because I
Um,
met her in Nevada to talk about this, about the children,
mhm.
and she said, "Oh, you must come and see me." And that's when, because she was doing a little course of talking to people,
Yeah.
and she said, come on to that." And that's when I started to find out from her how widespread it is.
I can't even begin to imagine how painful that is. And the question is, the fascination with ET and the beyond as starseeds we hold and share. But this aspect is very, I don't say it's dark, but it's very unsettling and painful to know that you're being seeded out there, that you're seeding out there, and that God knows how many other children are out there. And
Yes,
what is their fate? What is the purpose? I'm sure you keep asking yourself, what is the purpose of it? Well, obviously, the purpose is to create, to regenerate species. But
yes.
what is their fate? Have they ever told you?
Well, not that I'm aware of consciously. I'm sure there is so much inside me with 60 odd years of experiences that I'm not able at the moment to get to. And that's the frustrating thing, I think, with with this subject. Some people have much greater memory recall than others, and I'm probably not even in the middle of that.
But how many people have had the experience of having this hybrid say the words, I love you? That's
I
pretty,
don't know. I don't know about that.
that's pretty remarkable.
Yes, it was because it's the first time she ever spoke. Yeah, and it was hard. It was
So
very
how long
hard.
ago was that?
Sorry,
How long ago was that?
that would have been in the 1990s
And
that
have
that
you had
happened.
any further contact?
No, I've asked that I need to see her again and and see and see some of the others, not just that one. Oh, once I was taken another time, and they brought her out, and she was with a friend, another child. Now I didn't know. They didn't say not. I'm consciously aware. They didn't say this is one of the other children, but they were both excited being together and seeing me. And just like human children, they started to not go over the top, but as children do, and they were playing around and playing with each other and falling down and picking themselves up like human children would do. But I didn't have much um, time to communicate.
Just a glimpse.
Just a glimpse. I mean,
Okay.
there might be more. I don't know.
So, from that point to now, how many, I mean, you've got a chronology, so I don't want to go ahead of you,
It's
but
okay. Carry on.
from that point to now, let's talk about what it's been like between being taken, the experience of that memory. It must be very haunting. And what does it feel like? That's 1990s. We're 30 years, 30? Yeah, 30 years down the road here. What happens now?
Yeah, what happens now? I mean, I've always accepted it. I don't really have a great deal of fear. I rather just fill myself with light. And like you, I've been taken into the light, and I know how incredibly moving that is, but we can talk about that just a little bit later on. But I don't have any. I used to say to these greys, I used to say to them, look, I don't mind you coming here and taking my sperm if it's going to help a race somewhere, you know, in love and light. I don't mind helping. But what I would appreciate is for somebody to explain to me what's going on.
That takes a lot of courage, Mike.
It's my body you're using.
To say to the Greys, I don't much mind you taking my sperm. However, that takes quite a lot of character.
Yeah, but it doesn't scare me. Does not scare me at all.
I'd like to just add a little quick story here. So
Yes.
back in the day in Rome, I had a New Age center. It was the first New Age center in Rome. It was called Lightworks. And I was doing some pretty exciting work, crystal, psychic healing work, and encountering God knows what, lots of entities and every kind of thing. And one day I had a woman who was very ET. I mean, she was just not from this planet. Okay.
Mm.
And she was struggling, and she had all these underwater fantasies of being underwater all the time. Because when I laid her down on the table and I started to put her in altered state, I saw gills on her throat.
Oh.
Gills going in and out, and it kind of took me back. And she was saying, "I can't breathe. Oh my God, I can't breathe." And I said, "Do you want me to stop?" And she said, "No, no." And these gills were going up and down, and then, like you described, I had five grays, or six grays just materialized from the bottom up around the bed, and at the end of the bed was a taller gray, just like you described. Okay, that's why when you were telling that part, I was kind of taken aback. And I went into automatic mode as well. And watching them, I mean, I remember my reaction because I was fully conscious. I was healing this girl, seeing them. And then there was this huge tube coming out of her power chakra. It looked like a Hoover, and it went right through the ceiling. And I said, if you can believe this, I demand to speak to the high commander here. This tube was like, yeah. And I said, this is a sovereign being. You have no right to interfere with the sovereignty of a human being. I demand that this be removed immediately. Can you believe this? With 5 grays and this very large creature that was not pleasant. It didn't feel like a good energy at all. Watching me at the foot of the bed. And this tube started to dissipate and disintegrate and disappear. And later I thought, oh boy.
Wow.
Because like you know, in those states, you're not thinking, you're just being, you're just some other power is
Yeah.
involved. But to say, I demand to speak to the high commander.
You do it.
The high commander decided it was okay for me to do. But you step into it, don't you? You step into some kind of grace and power, and in your case, you were taken, but still there was your cognizance of like you said, I don't much mind you taking my sperm, but I would like to know what you're doing with it, and I want it to be for the highest good. It's the
Yeah,
same energy as I demand to speak to the high commander, right?
absolutely. And it does, to a certain extent, it seems like it works. Whether it does or not, I'm not too sure. But the Greys used to get a bit crafty, because I remember once they, I was I was called to go and look out. It was early in the morning. I got out of bed to do it. I was called to go. I had a little, because I lived in the top of this large house. There was also a flat roof outside that I could go. I could go through this roof door, and I could walk down into the woods. And I was called out to that roof door. So I went. I, I got to the door, and it was all glass. And I was looking down into the courtyard where some of the cars were parked. And this was about 3 o'clock in the morning, classic time. And my neighbour Simon was standing outside looking up at my roof door. And he waved to me. So I waved back to him. And I thought, oh, Simon out there, I'll go down and see him. And then I thought, oh, hang on a minute, what's he doing? Standing in the car park at 3 o'clock in the morning, looking up at my door and waving. And I thought, no, there's something else going on here. And then all of a sudden, it made me jump back, because it took me totally by surprise, because I was right up to the glass window of the door. This Grey's head suddenly popped round the side of the door and was right up in front of me. And I stepped back and I thought, oh my goodness. And then I thought, yeah, that's what it's them. They're trying other ways of getting me to go outside. Because I used to sometimes try and get me to go out into the woods, and I wouldn't go. So I thought, no, I'm not falling for it. So I went into the kitchen and made a cup of tea. Thought that'll keep me awake. And I sat down and drank a cup of tea. I wasn't aware of anything else happening. And when I went back, they were gone. But they've tried different things like that. And it seems rather odd, because they can just come and take you through frequency changes.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Why would they be trying to get you to go into the woods when they could just take you at will?
I don't know. There's so much that I do not understand.
But that really would have been a frightening experience, right?
No, I just had to make a cup of tea. So I didn't want to go back to sleep immediately in case they did take me. But if they want to take me, they'll take me. There's nothing you can do about it. I mean, Jim Sparks said that in his book. You know, when he thought if he kept moving, if he kept running away, sort of thing, they won't find him. And there was another lady I read about who done the same thing. She kept running and moving, keep moving. But it doesn't work. I know when I went to Mexico back in the early 1980s to visit some of the Mayan temples, I was taken on the first night. You know, it's halfway around the world. They know exactly where you are.
Well, it's your frequency. It's got nothing to do with
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think is the Grey agenda on the Earth right now, or am I jumping ahead of your chronology?
No, you can jump ahead as much as you like. I've got the list here. I can always go back to it.
No, let's keep going. I'm fascinated.
Oh, yeah? Well,
take us through your list.
The next major impact, if you like, what was strange. I'll just go into this a little bit first, but where I lived in Stratford, that the part of Stratford I lived in, it was right near a place called Hackney Marshes. Now, Hackney Marshes, it was quite a dangerous place. You know, there were deep ditches full of water and mud, and right over there was the industrial part of the River Lee, which ran quite fast, and it was dark grey, muddy colour. And there were two big companies on the opposite side. One was Clarnico Mints, and the other one was Yardley Perfume. And you could smell really strong smells coming out of both of them, and they clashed. So there was like, Yardley perfume mixed in with Clarnico mints, and it was always that would take me back there, that specific smell. But as kids, it was a brilliant playground, even though it could have been dangerous. It was an amazing, desolate place. And I used to have to walk past Stratford shunting yards where the trains were, masses of railway lines. It was a huge shunting yard. We used to mess around there as kids and run across the railway lines as kids did those days, not sitting with a phone scrolling on social media, passing your time. We went and played with the trains when I was young. So, but you went down a little place called Temple Mills Lane. Interesting name because there was a temple there at one time, years back. Now, we'd gone over there one day and I was about 11. So this was about 1962. And we went right over to the River Lee and we were messing around along the bank of the River Lee doing dangerous things. And then we saw this old rowing boat on the other side of the bank. And there was a bridge that went across between these two big factories. So we went over the bridge. We was now on private land, but we went down to where the rowing boat was. It looked pretty knackered, to put it politely. And we got the water out and sorted it out. There was no oars, and it was starting to get quite dark now. We'd totally lost track of time. We'd been there the entire day. Now, my three friends got into the boat. One of them couldn't swim, and I couldn't swim till I was 14. I was just putting my first foot in to get in, and I heard this voice in my head, and it said, "Don't get in that boat." And I was standing in deep mud anyway, so I took my foot out and I said, "No, I'm not going." And they said, "Right, well, push us out then into the middle of the river." And it was dark and it was getting misty. It was a bit creepy now. I pushed the boat out. It was silently going through the water, but gradually, like you see in these scary films, it was gradually disappearing into the mist. And I could feel myself getting really frightened inside. I thought, oh my God, you know, one of them can't swim. They didn't have any oars. So I'm standing there and I started to get a little bit scared because you got to go right back across the marshes and it was pitch black. So I crossed over the bridge and I started to walk along and I stopped and I froze and I thought, how do I get across here? I can hardly see where I'm going. When all of a sudden this being appeared. Now I know now in later years it was my space brother Telosh who saved us at Area 51, or I don't think I would have been here today, but that's a later story. He appeared, and he in the dark, he had his suit, tight silver suit was glowing, and he had long hair down to just below his shoulders, and his eyes were just sparkling blue, and he was looking down at me, and I said to him, "I'm scared. You know, I've got to go across the marshes. I want to get back onto Temple Mills Lane. Really, that's the shortest route, and then I know where I can go from there." And he looked down at me, and I said, "I feel that I'm lost here." And he said to me, "You will never be lost." And he said, "I am the stars, and you are in my journey." He said, "You have seen me before, and you will see me again." And in the next moment, I was on the Temple Mills Lane. I couldn't believe it. I don't know how I got there. And I ran all the way home, didn't stop. It was probably a mile. And I got to our street and I came round the corner and I was running down the street, and outside my mum's house was the three other mothers. They're all standing outside about to call the police because it was now about 10 o'clock at night. And I arrived and my mum said, "Where have you been?" And I said, "Well, we've been over on the marshes." And she said, and that mothers were saying, "Well, where are the others?" And I said, "Well, they're in a boat." I said, they've gone down the river and didn't even have an oar. And one of them couldn't swim. They were in absolute panic. My mum said to me, go indoors and wait for me. I went indoors. I thought, God, I'm going to get the bashing of my life here. And probably in those days, rightly so. And she came in and she said to me, I'm really proud of you. I thought, what? You're proud of me? And I said, why? And she said, because you had the sense not to get in that boat. So she was okay with me and she made me tea and I went to bed. But in the morning, my mum came in and she said to me, the three boys are safe. And I said, well, what happened?
Goodness.
And she said, well, they were going down the river and they suddenly heard this rushing noise. And it was a weir. And they were heading for this weir.
What's a weird?
Where the water rushes down through. I think it's to somehow do something with the flow of the river. It drops down very fast. Yeah, it's like a waterfall in the river. I suppose you could call it a waterfall.
Okay.
And what happened was they heard the rushing and they could see this white water just about ahead. One of the lads was a couple of years older than us, and he was quite a toughie, quite a hard nut. And he got hold of a branch in the tree, and they held on to him, and he was trying to hold the boat in that place. One of the lads was crying. He was tipping out the water with a tin can that was in the boat, and then they were shouting out. It was midnight. It was midnight, and this man was going along to do night work, and he heard them calling and looked over, and he ran off and got a rope and managed to go down there and pull them in. And they said to me, the boys, they said, if you had been in the boat was sinking, it was leaking fast. They said, if you had been in the boat, it would have sunk. And that might be why Telos said to me, don't go in the boat. But the interesting thing about where he dropped me at Temple Mills, the top end of Temple Mills, which would be another story just a tad later on. It's where I found the green stone, which had enormous impact on me. Emerald, large emerald set in beryllium. And also it's where I drove through a fog right at that spot where he dropped me. When I was 17 and I was engaged to this young girl, I was driving home from her place in a place called Dawston, and I was to drive through Hackney, near Hackney Marshes, and then I would drive down Temple Mills Lane. It was the most weird experience, and it's one of those things that has never ever left me. I can still feel it today. I was driving along in my old car, which I paid £8 for. I had a transistor radio on the passenger seat, and it was playing the song by Mary Hopkins called "Those Were the Days, My Friend," and that was playing out. And I was driving down Temple Mills, and all of a sudden appeared, it was like a wall of fog. It went straight up like it was a straight wall, but it was a fog of some sort. And I drove into that fog, and when I came out the other side, I felt really strange, really odd. And that is something I've always wanted to try and look into, because over 50 years later, I still get this feeling in my solar plexus when I think about driving into that fog. And this all happened near Temple Mills Lane. All
So
those things.
the feeling that you felt, besides when you say you felt odd, can you give us more information about
Well,
what it was
no,
like?
no, not at that time. I felt different in myself. I can't. It's difficult to explain. I just
You
felt.
entered into another dimension?
Well, I could have done. I could have done. Thinking back now, I was talking to a good medium once. I was talking to her, and I mean, she was a very good medium. There's a lot of mediums that are pretty rubbish. But she was really good, and I've met her at a meeting somewhere, and she came up to me and she said, "You're not from around here." And I said, "No, I'm not." And she said, "No, I mean, you're really not from around here." So
She said, I'm really not.
I said, "Oh, that's interesting." She said, I don't understand this," she said, "but you're from out there. You come from out there." She said, "You're here on a mission." And she said, "You've got two mothers." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Yes." She said, "You've got your mother on the earth and your mother in space," which is what I told my
You
mother
said,
when I was 4. My real mother, I said to her, I might have not mentioned this before, I said to Mum, my real mother, and I said, "You're my mother as far as bringing me onto this earth, but my real mother is out there in space." And she said, "You've got two mothers." And said, "Oh, so there's all this strange language coming into my head," this medium said. "All this knowledge, loads and loads of knowledge." She said, "and different languages." She said, "I just don't understand this. This is totally beyond me. I've no idea, but I've just got to tell you this," she said. And I said, "Well," I said, "look, is there anything you could tell me?" I said, "When I was 17 and I was driving down a lane called Temple Mills Lane, and I drove into a fog. Can you pick up anything on that?" And she said, "I don't understand this." She said, "I can just tell you what I'm seeing." She said, "But you went into some strange craft up in the sky, and what they're telling me is that this is the first time that they've done this with you, and they wanted to experiment to make sure it was all okay." Now, I don't know whether there's any truth in that or not. There's no way of verifying it unless I can get back into my inner self and find out what's hidden away there.
so
Um,
how many times would you say that can you even put a handle on how many times you've been taken?
no, it's got to be hundreds of times, and not just by the Greys, but by others as well, and of course by my space brother onto this huge, what I call a floating city.
All right,
And
so we don't have a lot of time left. Do
oh,
we
we haven't even touched upon it. We're not even touched upon my early life yet.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have to do a series here, okay?
Okay,
So we've been talking for almost an hour and a half, so I know
I
it doesn't
didn't
seem like
realize. I
it does,
didn't realize it was that long.
yeah. So I'd like to sort of put this into some kind of context where we can break, and then we will have our next encounter and take it from there, because I imagine the story of your space brother Telos is a unique unto itself and will fill at least an hour, just that, right?
Absolutely, yes.
So what
Yeah,
would you like to talk about now, and knowing that we've got about 10 more minutes before we will close for this encounter today, and then
right.
immediately do another one.
Well, can I quickly tell you about the green stone then? I could do that in 10 minutes.
Okay, great.
Because it was at the same spot. Because at the top end of Temple Mills Lane, there's these huge fields, this really, really wide area. And there's several football pitches marked out with no demarcation lines apart from this white line. And loads of people go over on a Sunday. There could be 10 football matches going on at the same time. But I was over there one day in the week. It was the same time, so it was around 1962. I was 11 years old, shortly after this experience where Telos had dropped me in the fog. And I was walking across this vast green mowed area with a friend of mine. Now, for some reason, I was looking down, but I was always trying to find things. I used to dig up old Victorian rubbish dumps and go out with my metal detector and try and find things from the past. I was walking across, and if I hadn't seen it, I would have trodden on it. It was an object that was totally out of place. It should not have been in this wide, open field of mowed grass. And it was like a huge green square emerald that was embedded which I recently found out was in a piece of beryllium, and it went into the stone about an inch, and it was out of the stone about 2 inches. I mean, thinking back now, I found a book recently, after all these decades, I found an image, and it's exactly like what I found, and it must have been worth a fortune. They said it's very, very scarce, this particular one. But there it was on the ground. I picked it up. I said to my mate, "Look at that," and he just ignored it and carried on talking. And I could feel something. I could feel some sort of energy coming from this emerald. I took it home, showed it to Mum and Dad. They weren't too interested. I took it into the bedroom, and I sat there and I was meditating with it. And it started to connect me to my homeland and to my space brothers. It was incredible. Every time I came home from school, the first thing I'd done was pick up this and sit with it on my lap and send my thoughts out and seeing these images. It was my connection to them. I came home one day. I went to get the emerald, and it was missing. And I said to Mum, I ran through to the kitchen. I said to my mother, "Where's my green emerald?" She said, "I've thrown it away." And I said, "You what?" She said, "I've thrown it away." I said, "You can't." So I've got to have that back. I need that back. It's really important to me. Where have you put it? And she said, "I've put it somewhere where you'll never find it." I mean, I was absolutely grief-stricken. And I said, "Why? Why have you done this?" And she said, "Because since you brought that home, these beings have been appearing in the house, and I don't want any part of it. I didn't want it here. And I never found out where it was. And I'm not over that stone. I still get very emotional
The
about it."
tragedy. Oh my God.
Well,
You know, it's
it
interesting
yes.
because it seems like, from that point with being taken by the Greys and then of this experience on the Temple Road with your Sprays brother Talos, you are now graduating to some other level. Was this correct?
Yes, yes,
Wow.
yes. Because
That's
it's where he dropped me. It's where the fog was, and it's where I found the green stone. Now, what is the chance of that as a coincidence?
well,
You know,
coincidence means happening at the same time. So,
absolutely.
that is really fascinating. Okay, so I hate to stop talking, but I find that if we go too long, people just tune out. And I'd rather break here and get back together with you and start with a conversation about Talos, the Grace, and pick it up from here. How does that sound to you?
Yeah, pick it up from here. Yes, yes. When I saw the giant mothership, and that would be 1970.
You want to talk about that before we close?
Might not be time. Is there time?
Yeah, we'll make time.
Right. Well, it was 1970. No, 1969. That's when the magazine came out. 1970. Um, I, I I'd recently moved out of London into Essex, a place called Raynham, and I started up a UFO investigation society there. It was 1969, so I was 18, and I'd got a job as a baker delivering bread for a company were known then as Wonderloaf. And I had a baker's van, and I used to drive around delivering to people. And I said to Mum one day, I said, "I'm going to see a flying saucer." And she just calmly said, "Well, take your camera with you." And I said, "Oh no, no, this is silly." I said, I'm not going to see anything." I went off that morning, and there was a little way along. Probably I've done about a third of the round, and I would drive up a cul-de-sac and deliver to a lady on the last house on the right. And I would sit there in the van and have a quick sandwich and a cup of tea from the flask. I was facing the little park that was in front of me, and beyond that was the Beckton Gas Works. It was 8:20 a.m. It was a clear blue sky, but the sun hadn't come up just yet. And all of a sudden, I saw this huge, it was over a mile in length, orange, cylindrical shaped object. And it was coming towards me. I jumped out of the van and I was holding my half-eaten sandwich here, and I had my flask of tea here. And my head was locked up into the sky. I was standing in the middle of the road, but it was a cul-de-sac. And it came quite near, about a mile away, and then it turned on its axis so I could see it lengthwise. And it seemed to be slowly turning because it got slightly thinner and then slightly thicker again. I was amazed about this, and then I heard the milkman coming round the top of the road. He came down the cul-de-sac, and he used to stop to go into the park, to go into the public conveniences. So I thought, and in my mind, I thought, great, when he passes, I'll tell him to look up into the sky and see this huge object over a mile in length. And he came by and he said to me, "Morning, Baker," and I couldn't answer. I simply could not talk. And he went into the park, and I thought, well, he's got to come back out. Surely, if I still can't talk, he's going to think, well, what's he looking at? Standing in the middle of the road, looking up in the sky. You'd think you would, and look back to see what you're looking at. He came out. I could see him looking at me, wondering, he's a bit odd, he's not answering me today. But he didn't turn and look back. He got straight in his milk float, turned it around, and disappeared. And then telepathically, from that craft, they said to me, a part of my consciousness had gone into the craft.
Yeah.
And a part of it was still down here.
But
and
you were in
said
the dimension. That's why he couldn't see it, right?
It could have been. He said to me, this is for you only. This is your experience. He wasn't meant to see it.
Yeah.
And then I eventually came to, I was so excited. The first thing I thought of, I mean, I hadn't had much experience then of craft when I was 18. I'd seen some things. And I thought, I'll ring the Daily Mirror, which is one of our national papers. And I telephoned, it was opposite the telephone box. And I said, I've just seen this huge craft in the sky, this huge UFO. I said, it's over a mile in length. I said, it's covering a huge part of the sky. I said, this is work time. You know, the roads are busy with people going to work. There must be other people that have seen it. I said, it's incredible. And this man more or less said, don't call us. We'll call you.
That's why I laughed.
I slammed the phone down. I got back in the van, and it gradually moved off. And then I came to, so I was able to drive the van, and I went up round top of the road, and I called at the first house to take her bread in, and she said to me, "My goodness, Baker," she said, "what on earth is wrong with you? It looks like you've seen a ghost." And I said, "No." I said, "I've just seen this huge flying saucer, this huge tubular disc in the sky. It's over a mile in length. It was incredible." Yes, Baker. I think you better come in and have a nice cup of tea." I said, "No, honest." I said, "It was huge. It was covering up the whole of the sky. People must have seen it." "Now, you come inside, Baker. I'll make you a nice cup of tea." So I went in, and she said to me, again, she said, "Look, perhaps you're just tired." I said, "No, it was huge, honestly." She said, I'm going to ring your boss and tell him to come and bring a relief driver." She said, "You're not fit to drive that van." And I thought, my God, if he brings out a relief driver, and she says to him, he's seen this huge flying saucer in the sky, he couldn't deliver his bread, I'm going to get the sack. So I calmed down, and when he came, he said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Well, I just wasn't feeling very well." So I went home on the bus. I told Mum about it, what had happened. She said, go across the road and get a paper and have a look in there, see if there's anyone you can write to." And I got a paper, I think it was the Telegraph, I think. Another coincidence, there's a man there called Robert Chapman, and he just brought out a UFO book called UFO. He was a science correspondent. I wrote to him, got a letter back, and he sent it to the editor of Flying Saucer Review at the time, Charles Bowen. And it was in this article here in March, April 1970. But it was from that experience that a couple of friends came to my house and said, have you ever been to Warminster? Which is a story in itself. It was famous in those days. I didn't know, with UFOs. It's an incredible story. I ended up living there. And they took me to Warminster, and we went up to Cradle Hill, the famous hill where UFO enthusiasts used to go. Now, up to that point, I thought I was the only person on the earth that was meeting and communicating with space people. I went up the hill, and there was 200 people up there, and it was a great awakening for me to realise I wasn't on my own. There's loads of people out there that are interested in this stuff, and it really, it was like an initiation.
Let me ask you this, and then I'm going to wind us down for today. Did you take that photo?
No, because I didn't take the camera.
Oh, you didn't take it. Okay.
No, I said to Mum, I'm being silly. I won't take the camera.
As we both know, what you're seeing psychically, it doesn't necessarily appear on a camera anyway. And then on the other hand, sometimes things appear when you're not seeing them psychically.
Well, absolutely, yeah.
Well, listen, Mike, we need to do a series of talks, because I knew this before we started. This is not going to be a one interview conversation, because your experience is so vast, and I'm fascinated, and I'm not always fascinated. So thank you for just like you said, this is just scratching the surface. We'll end here for today, but I'd like to, before we hang up, I'll stop the recording, and then we'll plan our second interview to take your story further. How does that sound?
That sounds, yeah, that's brilliant, and I appreciate your you invited me onto your show, and for your books.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having read them all and your words about them, because with someone with your vast experience, to have put them in such a light is a great honor for me. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So do you want me to, anything that you want me to post here as far as people getting in touch with you, you'll need to send me, do you have a website?
Yes, I do, but it's better it's probably easier to email me.
Okay. Oh, well, do you really want to put that out, a private email?
I've got a website. It's called inotherdimensions.com.
Okay. Inotherdimensions.com?
.com. Yes, okay. All one word, inotherdimensions.com.
All right.
I don't go on a lot. Sorry.
And the book is Does It Rain in Other Dimensions by Mike Oram. And we will explore that in our next encounter. So thank you all for tuning in, and thank you, Mike. It's been enthralling. I knew it would be. I'm so glad you got in touch with me. That's just amazing. And I'm going to sign out for now. Thank you all for listening. And after we hang up, I will be organizing with Mike for his second part 2, which could even go into infinity, because there's so much to share. So thank you all for tuning in. Mike, don't go away. I'm going to stop recording now, and I'll see you all beyond the matrix. Thank you for listening. Take care.